So this is another installment of Stuff I Own and another Mezco figure. This time it's Mr. Freeze. And when I did research on the character of Mr. Freeze, I was actually kind of surprised. There was some stuff that I really didn't know about. So when Mr. Freeze was first introduced, he was known as Mr. Zero, introduced in February 1959, and didn't return actually until the Batman television show. Uh, a episode called Instant Freeze where he was renamed Mr. Freeze. Now I would put Mr. Freeze, that villain name, probably within my top five, maybe my top three. I just love the simplicity of it. And it is now it sort of makes sense in that the Batman show from the 1960s was pretty silly and wild, and so they just called him Mr. Freeze, and it stuck. It's just such a simple, elegant name. I certainly like it better than, say, Captain Cold. I also like the character better than Captain Cold. He didn't appear in comics again until Detective Comics 373 in March 1968. So it was 9 years from when he was introduced, and when he was returned to comics, they stuck with the name Mister Freeze, and that's what it's been ever since. What also surprised me was to find out that his backstory with his wife Nora didn't, and I guess his name Victor Freeze, Fries, didn't materialize until 1992 in Batman the Animated Series. And I will also admit that one of my guilty pleasures is the Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. I actually loved him as Mr. Freeze and was the high point of the movie. And I know he gets hammered for his portrayal of Mr. Freeze, but to each his own. And I do think that as a freeze character, a cold character, which DC has a bunch, including Captain Cold, the Icicle, and others, he is, I think, by far the best. Captain Cold, I never really understood the character. I know a lot of people enjoy Captain Cold. He just stole his gun. Mr. Freeze, which is ironic that he's Mr. Freeze given the fact that he actually is a doctor. He created all of his stuff, so he's a genius on cryogenics. But he is my favorite of the easily my favorite of the cold characters in DC. So this figure really, I would say probably of all my Mezco figures, and I have a bunch, probably the most restrictive because of the outfit, and the outfit is absolutely amazing. These knees do not want to bend, and so just the whole costume is extremely restrictive. When I first saw this, I was like, well, what incarnation of Mr. Freeze is this supposed to be? Is this supposed to be from the video game? But I think that, as is often the case with Mezco, they just simply did their own thing. And I think it looks pretty cool. But if you look up Mr. Freeze online, there are about as many looks to him as there are images. So everybody kind of does their own thing. But this one has all sorts of different fabrics and textures, and it's really nice. It is unfortunate that the costume is so restrictive. And as I mentioned with my other figure, there are a ton of extras that come with this figure, but I keep them in the boxes because I don't really pose my figures. I put them in a neutral stance, and the main reason is because if I were, and this actually happened once, if I were to pose him, say legs bent, first of all I'd have to really crank him. These fabrics will eventually develop a permanent crease in them, so I just put them in a neutral stance. Again, it has a lot of different, this is hard plastic here, a lot of different materials. This is kind of a textured fabric. This is smooth fabric. And this his cryo suit is really neat. One of the things I like about it is that it's asymmetrical. This one here is missing its, and this is not broken off. This is how it came. It's missing the piece here. And so to me, I would say what they were going for is a costume that was created by hand, by Mr. Freeze. This was not some kind of manufactured costume. And I'm referring to just the figure itself, that it is giving the impression that Mr. Freeze created this probably from parts in his laboratory. So again, this is not broken off. This is how it is. This really is pretty cool because I don't know how well it shows up on here. It's kind of fuzzy, but it's supposed to look like frost, and I think it really does. And on the gun here, his cryo gun, it has frost on the tips. Again, these are not actually cold. They're just kind of fuzzy, but it does give the impression of being frost. This, I don't know if I can, yeah, so this will remove. And that is a gorgeous facial sculpt. Look at that. Is that not amazing? And also, this figure features light up features. So there are lights in here. And so if you turn on the light up features, it will illuminate his face from below. He's also got a cryo gun, a larger cryo gun with light up features. And then what you do is you press the button on the back here. Now, I removed the batteries, and the reason I did that is because and for a Mezco figure, I maybe one other, I can't remember if any other, the other Mezco figures feature light up features. But if I left the batteries in there and forget about it, they're going to corrode and damage a rather expensive figure. So this was probably about $120 for this. At this point, because of the limited articulation, the very limited articulation, it really is almost like a soft statue because there's not a whole lot you could do with it. And they'll show pictures in the advertisement. You could see here it's got these little things coming up, but not here. So again, I like the asymmetry. They'll show pictures of Mr. Freeze, like maybe down on one knee, holding the gun, doing all sorts of things. These are done by professional photographers that don't give a damn whether they damage the figure or not. They're just there to make it look cool. So, as with a lot of figures with outfits, the articulation is also often more theoretical than actual. So underneath all of this costuming, you can't remove the costume without destroying it. But there is a figure underneath this, a plastic figure with joints and everything. And so they simply probably repurposed the figure and then put the costume on. And it looks, in my opinion, it looks fantastic. And despite the fact that it does look kind of top heavy and maybe the heaviness on the back, it stands quite nice, which is not always the case with figures. But it's well balanced, and I think if you're this one came out a few years ago, so probably has gone up in price and possibly significantly, but definitely one of the most visually stunning of my Mezco figures, and I'm pretty pleased with this one. So that is Mr. Freeze from Mezco and their 112 Collective.